I'm Sarah Bowman, the Senior Director for Common Sense in Los Angeles. We're really thrilled to have you all with us today. We have local conversations in New York and San Francisco and here in Los Angeles where we have our friends and we have common sense conversations, and we decided that in this time of the coronavirus we would do these nationally and digitally. So this is our first one. Excuse us any little hiccups we have, but we're thrilled to be here. The idea is to tap into some of our very favorite experts to give you real-time advice to solve the dilemmas we know you're having at home right now. We all know these are unprecedented times on every level, but it's certain that media and technology have assumed an even greater role in our lives. I was listening to a podcast yesterday that featured Esther Perel, who's one of my favorite. She's an online couples therapist. She has a great podcast called Where Should We Begin, talking about communications in families. And she said, the devices that were keeping us apart are now bringing us together. And I thought that was such a perfect way to describe what's happening. There's more screen time than ever, so how do we cope with that? At Common Sense, we've always advocated for a balanced approach. We love all the wonderful things about media, and we know how important it is to teach kids how to manage their many devices and communications options. The idea at Common Sense has always been to offer research-based parenting advice, and at the core of our work is this notion of quality curation. It's really what you are watching that matters. So it's our mission to help kids thrive in this ever-changing landscape. That's why we founded our nonprofit 16 years ago. And in this kind of the COVID-19 virus, we created a new site, sort of a master big site, bringing 25 organizations together, 25 and counting. The URL is called Wide Open School. Our partners are Google, Sesame Street, Nat Geo, PBS Kids, on and on, all the best people on the internet. And it's designed as a single stop resource option for parents and for educators. And if you, for instance, went on there, you could say, oh, I want to think about art for my middle school age kids. You could watch a Khan Academy lecture on why looking at art is important, and then you could go watch an artist at the Met. You could tour the Met, or you could watch an artist like Gerhard Richter paint. It's kind of a wonderful place to be, and when this webinar is over in less than an hour, please spend some time looking there. Anyway, I'm really thrilled to have join with us Anya Kamenetz today. She's the co-founder of NPR's Life Kit. I think it's a podcast and a newsletter. And her book, Art of Screen Time, is one of our favorites. Anya lives in Brooklyn. She has 2 kids under 10, 2 girls, and she's at the front line of this experiment, working mother, and thinking about education all day for her beat at NPR. It's interesting, we were joking yesterday that her work and her home life have never been more relevant to one another. So we're going to hear from her in a minute, but first, a few details. At the bottom of your screen, there's a chat function. Everybody's muted except for me and Anya, but if you check the chat function, you can ask questions in there. All my colleagues, Dana and Aurora in the Bay Area and Lisa Solomon here in Los Angeles, are going to be monitoring your chat. And at the end of the 30 minutes, we'll get to the Q&A. And if you can't stay for the whole thing, don't worry. We're going to put it online, and we'll be able to share it with you along with the titles of all of our upcoming webinars, excuse me. So Anya, good morning. Can we put her up? I don't know if we can everybody see Anya yet? I can't tell. Okay, so Anya, say hello. I want to be sure you're there.
Hi, everybody.
There you are. I just want to say, first of all, I heard your piece on NPR this morning, and for all of you, we'll send this around in the chat link. Anya did a piece sort of looking at schools around the world after terrible emergencies such as Rwandan genocide, and how the kids fared being out of school all that time. So it's a pretty sobering piece. It gives you a real sense of what Anya looks at in her daily life, and I found it upsetting but also hopeful. So definitely we'll send that link around to you. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, Anya. Welcome,
Great.
welcome. How do we deal with all these changes in these rules around screen time? Can we still set limits? Is it even possible? That's what we sort of do at Common Sense. We try to set limits and give you good ideas for what you can do, but how the heck do you do it now?
I would say that I'm definitely, so the framework that I'm using right now is this is a crisis. This is the beginning of the crisis. And so with that in mind, I think we really need to think about harm reduction. This is not about perfection right now, but harm reduction is a concept in healthcare and public health, where you kind of say, we can't stop every bad thing from happening, but we can mitigate the impact of bad things. And so when we talk about screen time in that way, we're not striving for perfection. You're not going to be able to have the perfect kind of like screen-free family time, because everyone's trying to get work done. The learning is happening online. A lot of the socializing is happening online. So what we can do is we can triage, and we can shepherd our resources and try to say, okay, let's make sure everybody gets outside, at least once during the day. It's important to have that socially distanced outside time. Let's make sure that we don't go completely sideways with bedtime, because everyone really needs to rest. And it's nice if we can all eat a meal together and see each other's faces during the day. So with those kinds of signposts in mind, you work backwards from there, and you say, I'm going to figure out what is the best use of my time in between, but knowing I can't control everything at every moment. Did that go through, or are we having some technical difficulties now? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Anya. I think we lost Sarah. Give us one moment, please.
Okay, no worries. Just expanding on that point of harm reduction, I think that we know that children's media use has skyrocketed, and we've seen almost a doubling of some kid services. So, I think what's interesting about that is that we're going to see a real shift in the ways that we use technology and media. And some of them are going to be really creative and positive, because we are really shifting that important work that children have to do, which is connecting with peers, with friends, as well as learning. And so much of that is happening online now. And so that younger and younger kids are discovering that the screens can be a conduit to other people. And I think that's a very powerful opportunity if we understand kind of some fundamental principles around that.
I'm sorry, my Zoom died there for a moment. I'm back, people. I hope you survived without me. So I missed a little bit of what you just said. I was going to ask you your next question, but you might have covered it. I guess one of the questions
go ahead.
I had next was, do I really have to do this homeschooling thing? Sort of in terms of, how do we manage the harm factor, and how do we keep our kids satisfied and stimulated?
Yeah, no, that's a crucial question that I did not get to. So, first of all, I think it's really important for parents to understand, again, we're in crisis mode, and we're in emergency harm reduction mitigation mode. And your school may be putting up a lot of demands as far as, showing up on video chat or offering a lot of assignments. There's a very wide range in terms of what schools are doing. Those things are optional. Okay. Your school and your district and your state and the nation as a whole is going to figure out a recovery plan from this that will not involve making your grade schooler or middle schooler responsible for the assignments that they're getting now. They've got to do something else, because this is too big. Okay. So any attempt at homeschooling that causes a lot of stress or overloads the capacity of your family is something that I would recommend kind of taking a step back from. And we also have to recall as well, we're under so much stress as adults, and our children are under that stress as well. They're feeling the interruption in their routines and the separation from their friends and their other adults in their lives. And we can't push them too hard. It's not going to create a great outcome. And it's a delicate line to walk, okay? Because, and I went through this in my own household yesterday. This is very real. I was trying to encourage my 8-year-old to do some enrichment work over and above what her teacher's assigning, because she finishes that in like 90 minutes a day. And she really just balked and said, I don't want to do that. I'm not doing that. You can't make me do that.
Yeah, I can handle that.
And I had to listen to her, because, this is hard for her too. And she needs and deserves a little bit more choice
Right.
in what she's doing. So we can all benefit from being a little more flexible and forgiving of ourselves, of our kids, and of our schools, because we know that, not everyone's 100% happy with what their teachers are offering.
You had a nice phrase the other day. You talked a little bit about being able to pivot in those moments and to notice for all of us that kind of what I call the summer camp thing of like when we're in a flow and maybe dinner has to get made, but everybody's playing Monopoly and like that can happen hopefully in this time. And how do you not like freak out and change that moment up?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So we talked about kind of the paradox of it's good to have a structure, but you need to have flexibility within that because we are trying to foster those moments of flow for our kids, and that happens to us as well. So basically, I do recommend making a schedule for the day. I like ours on a whiteboard because it's easy to erase and shift and change up. But just kind of checking in and seeing how things are going. If your kids are really into something, trying to not break and let that go a little longer. That's something that good teachers also do. They see when something's really going well, they try to prolong it as well.
What other flexible strategies do you have right now in your household or that you've heard about people doing?
Well, choice time is always a great one, giving the kids kind of the autonomy to decide how they're going to spend a certain amount of time, knowing that they're going to be able to hopefully reflect on how that's working for them and make a new plan. We are being flexible and forgiving on wake up times. I know that schools are holding their morning meetings at different times of the day, but we kind of have to play that by ear because I don't like to drag my kids out of bed. That's the one kind of benefit of this time at home is that I don't have to wake them up so early in the morning.
Yeah. And how do you control your own use of technology and balance the job that you're doing as a reporter, as a mom? I mean, one of the interesting things is that all our roles are collapsed into one right now. You're the cook, you're the working person, you're the housekeeper, you're the husband, the wife, and you're the teacher.
Yeah, this is really, really tough. I think the major thing that I feel like I owe to my kids is my presence. So, and this is something that I'm constantly working on and have always worked on, the feeling of working from home with your kids is this feeling that, some observers call continuous partial attention. So you're always giving some of your brain to work, some of your brain to the news, some of your brain to your family, maybe something with your partner, household tasks, and everything kind of encroaches. So what I try to do is I can't control that all the time, but I can control the zoned in time that I do give to each of my kids, and just something like stopping and greeting them when I come into a room, making sure that they get plenty of hugs. Bedtime with my little one's really important. That's like an hour long of just one-on-one time that she really, really needs. And so, this has been child rearing advice for a long time, that you have to fill your kids' cups with attention and undivided attention. That's the really hard part, but it's really 15 to 20 minutes that can just pay off in spades because they're not coming and pestering you as much because they feel like they've had that little bit of connection. Obviously, I'm making it sound simpler than it is, but I think as a policy in the day-to-day, when it doesn't seem like the thing that you want to do. So for example, I walk into the kitchen to get a cup of tea and my daughter's like, read me this book. And I'm like, oh, I should go back upstairs and get ready for this phone call. But then I'm like, oh, you know what? I have 10 minutes to read her a book. And it will definitely be easier later if I read the book now. So just giving them that time.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of brings up one of the questions we're seeing in the chat, and we're going to get to all the questions at the end, or many of the questions, but the idea of having multiple age children at home and multiple demands for the kinds of attention they need individually or the kinds of demands that they're being put on them from their schools. How do you manage that, Mom?
Yeah, I mean, my kids are 5 years apart, so I definitely feel this. And I think there's a number of different strategies that you can try depending on what the goal is in that moment. So, obviously you can, if you have one of your children that has a longer attention span, you can set them up on a task and then give the other one what they need. You can stagger their snack times or even their entertainment times so that you have the chance to focus on one while the other one is occupied. You can also put one kid in charge of another. I mean, even a toddler can amuse a baby for 15 minutes and, older kids can be in charge much longer than that. I don't think we should be overburdening our kids with caregiving because, it's a huge responsibility, and we don't want it to interrupt the learning and the other work that they need to do. But in terms of, it's one thing to kind of say, hey, kids, get along. And it's another thing to say, hey, big brother, I'm giving you a very important responsibility to, read this book to your little brother for 20 minutes so I can make dinner. And I think that the way we pitch it can really go a long way sometimes.
Well, that's interesting. And going back to you and your partner, how do you handle watching the news? I mean, you're on Twitter. I know you're just inundated as a reporter naturally, and then as a curious person. How do you handle screening that from children? And that's such a potent factor in all our lives.
It is really hard. I mean, we definitely don't play anything with the headphones off in our house. We don't play the radio, and we don't have television.
Headphones.
Or yeah, exactly. So, taking time to process the news as adults after the kids go to bed. And that's when we kind of try to save our conversations about what do we do next, or what's our strategy, or who needs support. But I'll tell you, I mean, obviously it's not easy. You might just be looking at your phone to check the weather, and then some other alert comes through and it knocks you off balance for a while. I think that, we did an episode of Life Kit a few months ago about how to talk to kids about scary things in the news. And there's never any shortage of scary things in the news to tell them about. But I think one major thing there that I learned was they have some sense of what's going on, and their imaginings can be much scarier even than the reality. So even with the younger ones, I think it's good to give them as much age appropriate information about the situation as you feel like they can handle, because they're going to catch wind of one thing or another and they'll blow it up in their minds. And it's so much better if you can really sit down and talk to them and share with them as much as you feel like you can. I mean, thank God, I feel like I can tell my kids, at least there's not a lot of kids getting sick from this, I think that's very reassuring for them. So helping them understand why we're doing the things that we're doing, I think is important.
And I also, I think letting them know that you're upset about it too, like allowing them to see that this is frightening and sort of verifying that is probably helpful too. It's like, wow, I had a hard time with that too, but here's the way I'm thinking about it. So modeling that behavior.
It's very powerful. And I've discovered this in my parenting, to be able to tell your kids, I'm scared, these are the things that I do when I feel sad, and not having to hide those emotions from your kids. Not that they don't want to see you completely go to pieces every day, but, being able to process and say, this isn't a scary thing. This isn't something that we hide away. This is something that we talk about, and we can help each other. My kids love to hear, that I feel better when I get a hug from my daughter. She can make me feel better, and that's empowering for her.
Right. That's great. So let's pivot a little bit to this notion of we're now on screens more than ever. Our research has showed over the years that kids don't spend a lot of time being creative online, but now is certainly an opportunity to be creative online. How have you done that in your household?
Yeah, I think we've all gotten a ton of relief from the ways that we're connecting and keeping in touch with family and friends, even, the ones that are far away. So in my house, my mother, my children's grandmother, is teaching an art class to my daughters, and it's something that they both get engaged in, which is great. I have family members and other friends and people that are doing music online, sing-alongs. They're doing dance parties online, show and tell, different kinds of projects. And so ways that you can connect and also be creative. I think it's such an important way of processing what's going on as well.
Anything else? I mean, I sort of asked you all the questions we were talking about, and we can go to our panelist questions in a minute, but I didn't know what else you wanted to talk about, or if you wanted to mention more about the article you did for NPR this morning.
Well, so the article is looking at sort of countries around the world that have had big interruptions in their education. It also includes, right here at home, New Orleans, where schools closed for the entire semester after Katrina, and Puerto Rico, where schools closed after Hurricane Maria. I think that there's so many lessons to be drawn from that world. One of which I took home was that, we should think in terms of a years-long recovery process. So, and most of our kids are going to catch right back up and even move beyond where they might have been. But this is a major, major disruption, and it's not going to go away, with the snap of a fingers. I think it's important for us to recognize that. And the other thing is that just in so many incredibly difficult settings around the world, whether that's refugee camps in Bangladesh or in Somalia or the Syrian children diaspora across the Middle East, we're seeing incredible creativity where using video, using text messages, mass media, using radio, using television, attempts to keep children connected to learning and to their teachers. And in a lot of ways, kind of that effort is really inspiring because it's keeping communities connected to each other, and it's helping create hope for the future and plans and energy for the future. And so I think that we can take a real leaf from that, because there's this explosion of creativity going on. I mean, the things that Common Sense Media is highlighting, these technological kind of breakthroughs, and every single thing that each of you is doing as you're, at home with your families and figuring out how to share your learning with your kids and what you love. All of that is going to pay off in so many different ways in years to come that we have no idea right now.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't have little children at home, and I admire all of you that are handling that. But I would think you'd be trying to think, well, what are the things that I can teach my children long term that I don't have time to do in that quotidian rush to school, get the carpool out? But what are the things, whether it's cooking or chores or all the things that we always wish we had more time to do, really focusing on what are their skill sets? What can they be good at? Because those will help them in the long term. And we have time to do that now, which is very hard to do in the moment.
I mean, homeschool families are really out ahead of us on this because, people that have homeschooled for a long time understand that the kids learn from life. They don't just learn from books. And so everything that you're doing in your house right now, whether that's planning a grocery trip to feed you for 2 weeks, or planning a backyard garden, or even trying to get the Zoom backgrounds changed. That's something that my daughter became an expert on. These are all things that they can learn from if you involve them in it. And I think that's one of the best ways to go about this whole homeschooling thing. Yeah,
I think that's a great takeaway, that whatever you're having to do is a learning experience. I remember when my kids were little, cooking is science. Cooking is a science experiment, Okay, we have a few questions from the group. I'm looking here, Anya. A lot of school Zoom meetings are happening.
Yes.
Yes, it looks like the question is that they're happening at the same time. Is that the question, folks? We're sort of culling through the chat function. That seems to be the question. So how do you do that? How do you deal with Zoom meetings, and how do you deal with Zoom meetings at the same time? And how do you find room in the house to have everybody have their own, private Idaho?
Yeah, I mean, the Zoom meeting thing, families have different constraints. So if you have one device, then you're going to have to triage and make a determination and let your kids' teachers know that you're going to show up every other day. And it doesn't mean that you're not interested in what they're offering. So I think that hopefully teachers everywhere can understand that. If it's not an issue of your number of devices and you're just wondering how to manage it, I would say, again, take turns with one of them being a little bit late to get onto the Zoom, because, this is the real world and we have to share resources with our siblings. And see if one of the kids can be prepared to kind of get on there on their own. So those would be my strategies.
And what about Zoom etiquette? You had a cute thing on your Instagram feed, which I recommend to everyone, about setting up for a virtual play date, right? Which is sort of akin to having proper manners on a Zoom.
Yeah,
meeting.
absolutely. So what I tell kids, and when I said in the video with my daughter, it's really good to respect other people's time. As far as the timing of the play dates, we have social hours at our house. So we try to, get the kids not to call each other when it's not social time. I said that you should be extra kind on Zoom because you can't always read people's facial expressions. And so teasing might be hard. And then one of my friends, someone on Instagram, a child had a question, which was, how do you say goodbye out of a Zoom call, which I thought was really interesting. And I think, it's helpful if you can assist the kids in setting those boundaries and saying, well, I have to get off at 5:30 because I have dinner, and just helping them understand how to do something like that.
Right. Okay. That's great. So let's see. We've always followed the idea of setting up our child's workspace in a public area in our house so we can oversee and interact during homework and game time. But with distance learning and live Google Meetups, that really requires quiet, private space. My son's in his bedroom at the desk with the doors closed, which is a tricky balance because I know he needs support and check-in, but also the privacy from the rest of the household to have a place for productive classroom work.
Yeah, I mean, I would say this might be an opportunity for your son to build that attention span and to help with his motivation. I mean, you might, do a modified version of Pomodoro technique where you give him, 20 minutes on and then a 5-minute break, and you set timers to help with that. But really, this is a process of our kids gaining new skills in terms of staying focused on their work and understanding the motivation to do that. So I would say, try to help them build momentum as far as getting to work independently without needing kind of a nudge from you.
Right. That Pomodoro app was around when my son was in high school, which I thought was fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit? I didn't know if that was still happening, but that helped me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just you can use it as an app. You can also just use it with anything with a timer, and it basically, you have a certain amount of focused work time and then it goes off and you get a break from it, which is usually shorter than the work time. So you build up over time how long you can work without taking a break.
Yeah, I think that's great. Another good question, how do you work to strengthen your relationship with your kids during this time? So you're not just like nag, help. I want to,
Yeah. I think that's a really great question. I think what's been helpful for me in this time is thinking about the whole family unit and ways that we all are here to support each other. So I'm really taking some time to check in and feel gratitude that I have these crazy zany beings in my house that aren't totally burdened with all the news that's going on. And so I can't focus 24/7 on what's happening in the outside world. I have to focus on these people. And, so for me, understanding just in the last couple of weeks that like, I get as big of a charge from hugging my 3-year-old as she does from hugging me. And so taking that time to enjoy it and realize, and try to do things that you truly can all enjoy as a family, whether that's bicycle rides or movie nights or, some kind of funny ritual, pranks and jokes. I've been hearing from a lot of families that did not skip April Fool's Day this year because they really needed some break. Dressing, anything you can think of that truly would be fun for you as well as them, and making sure that you build that into the rhythm of your week.
There was a great article, I forget which paper it was, and we'll find out and send it around. The games that you could play virtually, like if you could actually play Monopoly with the cousins or play a game virtually if everybody sort of had the same board and was moving at the same time, which never occurred to me. That seems like a lot of work, but yeah. Are there other things that you, so that the other creative things you've done in terms of, I know you have a daughter that's a great reader and you're painting with your mom, like fostering other creative ventures in your house?
Yeah, well, one thing that we've leaned into is actually acro yoga, like partner balancing. So it's something I always did with my older daughter especially, but now we're going on websites, looking up new moves. We actually did a live Zoom class with another parent-child, other parents and children doing it also together. So yeah, that's super fun for us. Anything physical, I think, is a good thing to try. My daughter went on with her friend and they were on probably FaceTime, and they pulled up a YouTube workout video and they were doing the video together, which I thought was so cute.
Yeah, that's great. And what do you think? Well, how do you think this will end? I mean, what things do you think will stay, and what things do you think will drop right away? That's asking you to be a futurist, but I do think there are so many good things that are happening, even if we can't always recognize them in the moment. What do you think will get chucked, and what do you think we'll manage to maintain?
Oh, that's such a great question, Sarah. I mean, I think people discover both the advantages and the shortcomings of online learning and online connection. And I think that, we're not going to forget that easily. This idea that we can all be together from all over the planet, and that's actually truly an option even for young kids. I think that they're going to still want to do that. Like, I know for a fact that my daughter's still going to want to video chat with her friends after this is over.
Yeah.
And online learning, I think the idea that you can learn anything from anywhere has been hyped for a long time, but school districts, public schools, didn't have the the impetus, frankly, to do it because they were too busy doing what they have to offer day to day. Now, when, you know, they think ahead to kids going back to school and the enormous remediation effort that's going to happen, they're going to have to remediate, they're going to have to accelerate. Why wouldn't you use free online resources to extend the school day and the school year in order to try to catch kids back up or get them learning about new things that they never knew it before? So, so I foresee a lot of that kind of getting, you know, more and more integrated. And then the other thing that I'm curious to see is so many workplaces transitioning into work from home.
Yes.
That parents are kind of seeing, you know, there are very exhausting things about being home with your family all the time, but there's also really wonderful things about it. And so maybe there'll be more families that will choose to make some version of this work, you know, the juggle, hopefully with a little more help. But,
Right.
you know, I love working, you know, if it weren't for the apocalypse outside, I would love working from home 6 hours a day and then spending the rest of the time with my kids. Cause that's,
Yeah, and not
that's just-
commuting. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the workplace is a very interesting question. I'm sort of cobbling together a bunch of questions on here. Certainly, I was asking my mom remember back when polio, when you couldn't go to the movie theaters because you could get polio, and sort of having that, I mean, my mother's older, but having that sense of generations being able to talk through what they had to do in wartime, because that's effectively what we are, and trying to emphasize to children what a miracle this is, that everyone's actually staying home, or most states are, you know, that we're doing this collective wonderful thing, even though it seems terrible, and sort of the historical precedent of that, like the stress that other generations have had to go through, whether it's Anne Frank or whatever you would talk about.
Right. No, I think talking about history is really galvanizing and inspiring for kids. And they're, you know, kids have always been really interested in history, and helping them understand the sweep of this and how it compares to other times, I think can be tremendously grounding.
Yeah, and there's obviously a lot of resources online for history. So I'm looking to see here in my little Slack if we've got more. Okay, so I would pitch once again our new site. Anya, I think you looked at it, the Wide Open School. We're hoping that everyone will go on. Any comments about that?
Well, you know what I love about it is that it's so curated, because I think there's somebody who put a note in the chat about this, that it is so overwhelming, the number of links that are coming at parents. And, you know, resources are not education, and there's no screen that you can click that's going to, you know, keep your kids occupied for 8 hours a day. But, you know, I think it's a really great start, and it helps people understand the different categories. I love the field trip option. I think that's something that would always be kind of appealing to my kids, to kind of get a live view or a walking tour of a place. You know, also the social emotional resources are really, really important. You know, we may not be getting that directly from our kids' schools, but we all need resources for dealing with anxiety, for understanding our emotions, for having strategies to, you know, overcome a meltdown. And I think more than ever, we're going to be needing those kinds of supports, and we need to be those supports for our kids, even when we ourselves might be struggling. So just knowing that those resources are out there, I think is really important.
Yeah, so on the site we have exercise, and remember the site is 2 weeks old. So basically we partnered with Nat Geo and the Met and all these tremendous resources, and we're trying to bucket them all exactly so that you don't go to your computer and go, I don't know what we're going to do for the next hour, and start searching around. We have them all in one place, wideopenschool.org. That helps you. So again, you can sort for age band, and you can sort for interest. So it might be about yoga or meditation or exercise you can do at home. It might be science, science. It might be math. It might be reading. It might be field trips. There's a lot of great museums right now that are opening their doors, and Google has 360 degree. If you were reading a novel about Pakistan and you wanted to go on Google and look around Pakistan, and sort of being able to do that linked learning at any age between, oh, you read about something, you heard about it, or in history or fiction, oh, we can actually go see it in real life. And, you know, we may not be traveling for a while, so that may be as good as it gets.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. Do you have any wrap-up things? And then I have my wrap-up things. So Anya, your book, Screen Time, which I don't know if everyone can see all of it, but duck your head down. Screen Time, how your family can find balanced digital media balance digital media in real life, how your family can balance digital media in real life. It's been a great book. We've used it a lot at Common Sense, and you're bringing it out in paperback, I think, sooner than you thought, right?
Yes, that's right. So it's available now, of course, on audiobook or ebook, and my website link is there. And then in July, it will be out in paperback with a new preface that kind of tries to address a lot of what we're going through right now.
So what are your pearls of wisdom? If we haven't had them, have you figured out what you're going to say?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm just in the middle of all of it, but I think, this idea of balance instead of concentrating on the time alone, I think has never been more important because, we're here, we're in it. So the nature of screen time has completely changed and it's all around us and it's taking up so many different spaces in our lives. And I think, of course, we're going to go back to a somewhat, a world with more face-to-face interactions, and that will be great. But what we've learned in this time about what technology can and can't do for us, I think is going to stick with us for a long time. So I hope that that'll be, helpful for parents to kind of think about that we're going to have to be flexible and that these rules are going to continue to change, and they'll change in concert with our kids and with the values, that we agree on and believe in that don't change.
We're lucky to have you, Anya. I just love that you have the sort of the real time, got to snuggle with a kid for 10 minutes, even though you're preparing for call, where you're dealing with the Rwandan crisis and how those communities recover from an emergency. So you're a great resource, and everyone, I encourage you to get the book, follow her on Twitter if you're a news hound, follow her on Instagram. I'm sure you're other places, but those are the places I follow you. We adore you. Give you a big round of virtual applause here because everybody's silenced. But everyone, please do check out Anya's site. Please do check out Common Sense. We have lists and lists and lists of curated resources, whether it's best movie night or best math apps or, how to talk to kids about tricky topics. Our digital citizenship curriculum is in all these schools and has become more important than ever. LAUSD is kind of adopting it. We have been doing this on the front lines for a long time, and it's interesting that in the crisis, the things we've been sort of quietly talking about hopefully are there for people to use. I'd love you all to consider supporting Common Sense. We are a nonprofit, and we're trying to keep the lights on. We've spent a lot of energy and money trying to get this Wide Open School initiative off the ground, and we are here. You have this great team of us all around the country ready to answer your questions, so please feel free if you can't find something or you're looking for it. We'd love to help you find it. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you again to Anya. You're a treasure, and give your kids an extra hug, and I think that's it. I think that's a wrap. We got you out early. That's always our goal. So
Thanks so much, guys. Great to see you all.